wrestlers walking out of wrestling. Not as uncommon an occurrence as one might think, as it's actually happened quite a bit. In fact, it's happened so many times that it's managed to become the topic of this episode. Because today... Thank you to all my Patreon supporters such as Dakari Garman and Rodney Harris. You really help to keep this channel going. Thank you. Believe it or not, even though there are 15 entries on this list, this is still by no means all there is to it. Although I was particularly careful to make sure that I was only counting incidences where a wrestler did indeed walk out, and not simply fired or had their contracts run out. And so, if there are others that you could think of, please let me know down in the comments. And also, make sure that you're supporting this channel by giving this video a big like as well as being subscribed right here to Dave Knows Wrestling. Anyway, with that being said, on with the list. On the May 16, 2022 episode of Monday Night Raw, WWE announced on air that Sasha Banks and Naomi had walked out of the company as a result of a creative dispute. It was then said that the women handed over their WWE Women's Tag Team Championships to Head of Relations John Laurinaitis. This was followed on the next episode of SmackDown, where Michael Cole announced that both women had been suspended indefinitely. But furthermore, I do also want to point out that we still don't have all the information about the situation as of this recording, considering that we don't have an official statement yet from Naomi or Sasha, and we might never get one. And with only getting one side of the story, it does seem a little weird to jump to conclusions and take the information that we're given at face value alone. And so, with that being said, this is the last I want to talk about Sasha Banks for this list. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Okay, I forgot about this. Back in 2019, Sasha Banks walked out of WWE. I guess this is something of a habit for her. At WrestleMania 35, Sasha Banks and Bayley lost their WWE Women's Tag Team Championships to Billie Kay and Peyton Royce. The following day, Sasha Banks would cancel an appearance she had scheduled for the Wendy Williams show. This led to Sasha Banks taking some much needed time off to reassess her career and how much she wanted to still be a part of WWE. Then, after several months later, she would return to an episode of Monday Night Raw, and this time as a heel. But as previously mentioned, this wouldn't be the last time that she would do something like this. Toni Storm had a surprisingly short run on WWE's main roster, with her debuting on July 23rd on SmackDown, only to leave the company by December of that same year, last competing at a house show in a triple threat match between Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair, the latter of which is of particular interest, as Toni was entering a feud with Charlotte, who is one of WWE's top female stars. But apparently that wasn't enticing enough to keep Storm with the company, since after that triple threat match, Toni Storm packed up her things and went home, with several things being attributed as the reason to why she walked out, with burnout being listed as the major reason for why Toni Storm was unhappy in the company. In December of last year, Jeff Hardy was at a WWE house show where he teamed up with Drew McIntyre and King Woods to take on the bloodline of Jimmy Uso, Jey Uso, and Roman Reigns. But this match wouldn't go according to plan, as Hardy would walk right on out of it and exit through the crowd. This would be his last appearance for WWE, as he was sent home from the tour the following night, and then just 5 days after that he would be released from his WWE contract. Now, it has been reported that this was merely an overreaction by WWE, who believed that Jeff Hardy was under the influence and in violation of their wellness policy, although they were jumping to this conclusion before they got the results of his wellness test back. And once those results came in, it turned out Hardy was clean as a whistle, with it being reported that WWE was allegedly scrambling to try to make it up to Hardy, only to find out that he was more than happy to exit WWE. ACH was one of the hottest prospects out of Ring of Honor, and so when he joined NXT, it seemed like he was going to be the next big thing for the third brand. However, all that came crashing down after a horrible t-shirt design, which caused ACH to walk out of the company as he refused to work for Racist, with the t-shirt being highly offensive. Now, this all began in October of 2019, and then on November 13th, ACH announced that he had quit the company, with WWE officially granting him his release on the 21st of that same month. On October 9th, 2017, Adrian Neville walked out of WWE Monday Night Raw as he was scheduled to lose to one Enzo Amore on that show. It was reported that he had become extremely unhappy with WWE, citing incidences such as his WrestleMania match with Austin Aries being cut from the WrestleMania DVD, where if the match was on the DVD, the two of them would have collected royalties. But anyway, despite his importance to the company and all he did to try to elevate the Cruiserweight division, which sorely needed help at the time, it seemed like WWE wasn't taking Neville very seriously, which unsurprisingly left to Neville walking out. However, that doesn't mean that WWE was ready to let him go, at least not right away, as it was reported that WWE kept his contract frozen and was not going to release him until they could both mutually agree, which they eventually did by the end of August in 2018. WWE seemingly never had any idea what to do with Ryback, from his time in the Nexus to his rivalry with CM Punk, all the way to his feud with Kalisto for the United States Championship, and everything in between. Ryback was always in a state of flux. Now, the reason I bring up that US title feud with Kalisto is because that was his last match in WWE, as the two squared off at Payback during the pre-show in 2016. After this, on May 2nd, it was reported by WWE that they had sent Ryback home due to a contractual dispute, even though he was advertised to be in a battle royal that night, which he obviously didn't participate in. However, the following day, it was reported by Ryback himself on his own Tumblr page that it was his decision to go home, as that he had a huge problem with the lack of equal pay for talent and that he was really frustrated with creative. And then on August 5th, Ryback would take to his Instagram page where he would tell everyone that he was no longer a part of WWE. And just 3 days after that, WWE would make it official. After getting chokeslammed by Corporate Kane at the Royal Rumble, CM Punk didn't show up to the following Monday Night Raw the next night, nor did he show up for Tuesday's SmackDown taping. And so, by Wednesday, WWE stopped advertising CM Punk for any further events, with CM Punk reportedly telling Vince McMahon and Triple H that he was taking sabbatical. Then, all the way on March 3rd, WWE finally acknowledged Punk's absence, with Paul Heyman coming out to CM Punk's entrance, to seemingly troll the audience. Then, in May of that year, Punk made comments on how it felt good to be retired at the age of 35. This was followed in July by WWE.com, moving CM Punk from the active roster page to the alumni page. Punk would acknowledge that health concerns were a major reason why he walked out, with WWE pressuring him to return before it was 100% confirmed that he was ready to be back. And of course, as a result of walking out, CM Punk was infamously fired officially by WWE on his wedding day. But despite all that, and despite CM Punk saying that he would never return to wrestling, as we all know, he is now a part of the AEW roster, where he seems much happier. When it comes to WWE and walking out, it seems
Are you trying to say that Gail Kim is more important than CM Punk?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
My rankings for this list would be so much better than yours.
So you haven't noticed that this list is going in chronological order, huh? Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, continuing on, Gail Kim entered a feud with Melina that mostly took place on WWE Superstars, which of course is not the most high-profile place to put a match. After this, Gail Kim would be featured as part of a battle royal to determine the #1 contender for the WWE Divas Championship. However, right after the match began, Kim would eliminate herself. This was apparently due to Kim being told that she had to get eliminated within the first minute, and so she did so as blatantly as one could. Then, just several days later on August 5th, Gail Kim would announce on her Twitter that she had quit WWE following the incident, although she would not be granted her release right away, with the company opting to make her sit at home for the remainder of her contract as a way of keeping her off TV and punishing her for the stunt. Starting around WrestleMania 18, Stone Cold began growing frustrated with WWE creative, citing that his match at the Show of Shows against Scott Hall had no build-up and was creatively very flat. This would only get worse as Austin was booked to have a feud with Brock Lesnar, starting with a King of the Ring qualifying match on Monday Night Raw, which Austin thought was a complete and total waste to give that match away on free TV with zero build, on top of it being merely a King of the Ring qualifying match, with the King of the Ring being something thoroughly in Austin's rearview mirror. And so Austin opted to walk out instead of having the match with Brock. But this wouldn't be the last time, as he would walk out again on June 10th. But after this walkout, all storylines for the Texas Rattlesnake were dropped. And on top of that, everybody from Vince McMahon to The Rock to even Jim Ross decided to verbally bash Austin on air, saying that he took his ball and went home. Although eventually, Vince McMahon and Austin would patch things up, with Stone Cold initially being fined $650,000 for his transgression, although that amount would eventually be lowered to a mere $250,000. Going back to 1999 in ECW, if there was ever one wrestler who seemed like they were going to be the next major star for the company, it would of course be Mike Awesome, as he was awarded the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Not once, but twice. However, that second championship reign wouldn't come to a close until after Mike Awesome became a part of WCW. On April 10th, 2000, Mike Awesome made a surprise appearance on an episode of WCW Monday Nitro, where he would attack Kevin Nash and join forces with the New Blood. Now allegedly, this was because despite how well he was being pushed, Awesome didn't want to sign a new contract to ECW until he was given all the money that he felt he was owed. And so, even though he was the champion, he felt no obligation to the company and decided to go with WCW, where presumably the grass would be greener. Although that would not be the case, as quickly Mike Awesome would get saddled with terrible gimmick after terrible gimmick, and he would end up dropping the ECW title to Taz, who was a WWF wrestler at the time. And this match is even more proof that the whole Forbidden Door thing is just a bunch of nonsense. By August of 1999, everyone was saying that WCW was a shell of its former self, and so in a backstage meeting, Eric Bischoff, who was already in panic mode, told everyone that if they were unhappy, they should, right here and now, get up and leave. And that's exactly what Raven did. He was also the only person to take Eazy-E up on this offer. Now, this was a shame, as Raven and his flock were a major part of WCW during their success, but nevertheless, by this point, WCW's creative was completely terrible. And so, Raven naturally decided that he would go back to ECW after being granted his release. And once there, he did a lot of great work, including a tag team run with Tommy Dreamer that reminded a lot of people of how good Raven really was when he's being used right, nevermore. Allegedly, Alundra Blayze was written into a storyline where she would get her nose broken by one Bertha Faye in order to justify her leaving television to get a nose job and breast implants, which supposedly was at the behest of one Vincent Kennedy McMahon. But Blayze subjected herself to this because she thoroughly believed that she was getting the opportunity to let the WWF Women's Championship shine, and when she returned to the WWF, she would be given that title for a second and third time, only to then find out that the women's division would be put on hold as a result of budget cuts. And so, completely furious with how the WWF was treating the women's division, she decided to take a better offer from WCW, walking out of the House of McMahon and showing up in the House of Turner, only to take the WWF women's title and throw it in the trash live on television. However, pausing the women's division might have actually been the better choice. As it stands, how often do you ever hear anybody bring up WCW's women's title? Well, let's just say there's a reason for that. Going back to 1990 and the date of October 29th to be exact, the Midnight Express showed up for a round of WCW tapings only to find out that they were not booked at all. However, they were booked to appear the following day and were set to wrestle several matches. Wrestle and lose. This only fueled Jim Cornette's belief that the team was being misused in WCW, and so he decided to plead his case to the then head booker Ole Anderson, particularly noting how unfair the scheduling was, only to have Ole reply that if he didn't like it, he could go home. And so, that's exactly what Jim Cornette did, and he took Midnight Express member Stan Lane along with him. However, Bobby Eaton had to stay behind because of family obligations. And as a result of this, we wouldn't see a version of the Midnight Express again until WWF with the new Midnight Express, a team that, well, best to not talk about. After returning to the WWF in 1983 as a heel, Slaughter would turn babyface the following year and become super over with audiences, especially after feuding with the Iron Sheik, with their boot camp match in Madison Square Garden being an especially noteworthy sellout. And with this, Slaughter believed he was destined for greatness in the WWF. However, his timing couldn't be worse, because this was also the same period that gave birth to Hulkamania. And since he wasn't to be the face of the company, Slaughter decided he needed 6 weeks of vacation, paid vacation at that, to which Vince McMahon Jr. said absolutely not. And so Sergeant Slaughter decided to walk out and no-show an event in Toronto, to which Vince McMahon promptly fired him. Slaughter would go to the AWA in 1985 through 1990, only to return once again to the WWF, where McMahon, still not forgetting what happened, turned him back into being a heel and going against the country of the United States, which was the exact angle that made him a popular babyface to begin with. Although in the end, Slaughter would get his country back and go babyface once more. I want to give a big thank you to everyone for watching this video, as well as to all of you who gave this video a big like. Plus, I also want to thank all of my awesome Patreon supporters out there. Thanks again for watching this video on 15 wrestlers who... And as always, Dave knows.